All right. Well, first things first. Why have you decided to run?
So there's a couple reasons. One of the big reasons is back a couple years ago, I kind of felt a calling from God to kind of get into the political field,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I wasn't exactly sure how. So I just kind of prayed about it and prayed about it. And about 2 years ago was when I felt the Holy Spirit kind of leading me to run for governor, and
yeah,
I'm just kind of trusting that process. But then also there's a lot of it to do with, in the past couple of years, I've gotten married, I've bought a home, I've had some kids, and so my perspective on things has changed a lot, or over the course of time with with those big
yeah,
changes in life. And when you buy a home and you have property and you have kids, you start to kind of really see the world outside of yourself and
yeah,
how and how you fit into the world. And when you have things like that, you want to protect them. And so I've seen, where a country is going, where a state is going, and I realized that, in order to make the state the best state that it could possibly be, we need people like myself in there, and people who aren't politicians. I think we've had so many
yeah,
politicians in the field, and in this path that we needed something different, a change. And who better to look out for the best interest of my kids than me? So that was a big reason
yeah,
too why I decided to kind of run, is to make the Florida the best state it possibly can be for my kids and their future, but also the future of every Floridian in the state.
yeah. All right. So what are your main priorities?
So my main biggest priorities is first taking care of our teachers and our kids with their education system.
Yeah,
Our education system is good, but it's not great. I think there's a lot of too much focus on testing. I think, it's all
yeah,
about testing it and trying to, every school wants to have the best testing scores and, to get the best,
yeah,
the best financial support. And I think we're testing our kids too much. We're over testing them and not teaching them enough life skills. And so I think that's important, is
yeah,
teaching our kids more life skills, more getting them more into trade schools and things like that, and showing them other opportunities besides just college. I went to college, and I think it's great and it's a great opportunity, but it doesn't have to be the only path.
yeah,
And so I want to improve our education system, and I think that also starts with improving our teacher salary. Right now, Florida is ranked dead last in the country as far as teacher salary, and yet
yeah,
Florida is one of the most expensive places to live. And so it's getting to the point where teachers can't even afford to live here, and so there are a lot of them are leaving the state, which then affects our education system. So taking care of our education system, taking care of our teachers, and above all else, taking care of our kids is one of the most important things for me. A lot of the other things that I'm kind of focusing on is taking care of veterans. We have, roughly
yeah,
about 2,500 homeless veterans in the state of Florida, and to me, that's 2,500 too many. You've fought for your country, you've served us, fought
yeah,
for our freedom. There's no reason you should be, living on the streets homeless. And I understand, I'm a licensed mental health therapist, so I'm well aware of the mental health factors that go into people
yeah,
becoming homeless and stuff like
yeah,
that. Between mental health and addiction and all that stuff. And for some of them, they choose to. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's, people who are homeless, it's not like a choice that they want to be homeless. It's they feel like they really don't have any other choice. And
yeah,
so, especially with our veterans and coming home from war and the stuff that they've been through and the traumas that they've experienced, it really has an effect on their mental health, which then, affects their life,
yeah,
marriage, work, all
yeah,
this stuff. And it gets to a place where they're homeless, and that's just unacceptable. So, focusing on taking care of our veterans and getting, you know, all homeless people, but especially our veterans, off the street, and getting them stable housing and getting them, working with them to get a better life for them and get back on track. So, education, taking care of our kids. And then, one of the big things too is it's just in our state right now is overdevelopment. Um, my wife recently got her real estate license, and so I've gone around with her to, different homes and stuff like that to, shoot videos for social media and stuff like that to,
yeah, yeah,
promote or trying to sell a house and stuff. And I've just seen like so many developments where it's just like rows and rows of, these developed cookie cutter homes that are just completely empty. And it's like
yeah,
we're building all these homes, but then there's nobody coming to buy them. And so
yeah,
we're just destroying land, just building and building, building. and it's ruining our Florida. So I think that's a big thing I'm focused on too is slowing down development. At the end of the day, development is necessary. People are coming here. We need, it's something that we can't just stop altogether. It's just
Yeah,
we have to be smart about it. So finding a smart way to develop our state, and make the space for people that are coming here without not destroying our wildlife, destroying our land,
sure.
and keep Florida. So those are just a couple things, but there's a lot of other issues I'm focused on. But those are kind of some of my top three right there.
All right. Okay, so what are the measures that you would like to implement in regards to education?
So for me, one of the biggest things for education is, like I said, is raising the teacher salary. If
Yeah,
we're getting the best, the brightest teachers here, that helps improve our education system. So, raising teacher salary, at bare minimum to, a rate where they can afford to live. What is the cost of living in Florida? That's what teachers should be making at
yeah,
minimum. So they at least can afford to come here so that there's Florida is a desirable place to live in general, but you know,
yeah,
making it where it's desirable and affordable. So raising teacher salary is going to be one of my biggest focuses because if we get better teachers, we get better education, and our students get
yeah,
a better education. But then again, like I said, kind of trying to find a way to eliminate testing. Testing is important because we need to it helps kind of judge and see accurately where kids are at as far as the education that they're receiving. But
yeah,
kind of cutting back a little bit more and focusing less on testing and more on trades, and just overall life skills, learning how to
yeah,
manage
skills.
a bank account. Yeah, yeah, manage a bank account, fill out a resume, things like that. So as far as education goes, those are kind of the two big things is paying teachers a livable wage so we can get the best and brightest here, and then limit testing and focusing on other skills besides just academics, which are very important, but there's other
Yeah,
skills that need to be highlighted as well.
yeah, all right. What are the measures you would like to implement in regards to mental health? You mentioned before
Mhm.
that you wanted to reverse the mental health crisis in terms of how veterans are going through a lot of not only mental health but also homelessness as
Hmm.
uh, as well. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's a big one for sure is, there's a lot of stigma with mental health,
yeah,
in the military. I served in the military also myself. I, served in the Army for 6 years. And, I can tell you it's a big thing with being in the
yeah,
military veterans because you don't want to be perceived as weak. And so to have some type of mental health issue, whether that's, something that you already had or something that you got from PTSD or whatever during your time in the
yeah,
service, it's something that there's a big stigma that people don't want to talk about. And so I think one of the biggest focuses needs to be on destigmatizing that and getting veterans and people in the service to understand that it's okay to have mental health struggles. There's millions and billions of people that have it. There's nothing,
yeah,
it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you. Something
yeah,
happened to you that gave you this mental health struggle, whether that's a traumatic event you got in the military or something, more biological, something that happened in your DNA. But it's
yeah,
something that happened to you. There's nothing wrong with you. And I think that's the big thing that we have to get, drilled into the brains of a lot of veterans. It's like, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. Just some things happened that kind of alter the course of your way of thinking and way of living. And we need to kind of help you with that. So
yeah,
I think that's the big thing because at the end of the day, you can't force anybody to get the mental health help if they don't want it or if they think they don't need it. So that I think that's the first step is overcoming that hurdle of getting them to understand like
yeah,
that it's okay to reach out for help. And then once we do that, making sure that we have the resources available. I think that's a big thing too, is there's, it's not, there's resources out there, but there's not a lot, and B, it's hard to find. Where do I go? Who do I even ask to find, homeless shelters or job resource centers or things like that? Like, where do I
yeah,
even go? The VA has some of that stuff, but you know, sometimes if you don't have quick access to a VA or if the VA is across town, way on the other side of town, and you're homeless and you have no transportation, well, how are you going
yeah,
to get there? And a lot of times the issues with, someone who's homeless is like, Well, I have all of my stuff is in this grocery cart. This is my whole world, all my clothes, my belongings. I can't just leave it
Yeah,
while I go apply for jobs or go to the VA, whatever, because this is my whole world. If somebody comes by and takes it, that's all of my stuff. So,
yeah,
helping, meeting them where they're at and understanding that it's not as simple as we'll just go apply for a job or go apply for housing or things like that. Like there's a lot of other factors that stop them. So
yeah,
coming alongside them, working with them, understanding where they're at and what they're going through, and then, walking them, step by step all the way through the process, not just, pointing them in the right direction of what to do and where to go and then just send them on their way. But,
yeah,
hand in hand, doing a wraparound approach, I think is one of the biggest things. And so, putting more financial resources and more time and effort into taking care of the veterans and coming alongside them, rather than just telling them what to do, because it's not always that simple. So for me, that's one of the big things
yeah,
is, destigmatizing it, but then also, providing them the resources and the where the resources are at and how to get to them and working alongside with them all the way to through completion until they're on their own and ready to go, and be stable on their own.
yeah. They deserve it.
100%.
So yeah. So speaking of mental health, I would also like to ask you about your policies, well, your measures, the measures you want to implement on healthcare.
Mm. Healthcare is a big one. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
as much as the state can control, that's kind of a big issue because
yeah,
it's more of a federal issue when it comes to healthcare. But as
yeah,
much as whatever the state can control, lowering costs, I think is a big thing. Keeping insurance companies in check because one of the big issues too, especially in Florida, is it's a big retirement state. So you have a lot of
yeah,
people here who are retired, and for a good portion of them, have retired well and they're doing okay financially. But there's a lot that also live on a fixed income, and so
yeah,
when insurance rates and healthcare rates are going up and up and up, well, if you live on a fixed income, that's no good for you after a while. So I think one of the big things is keeping these healthcare insurance companies in check and working with them, but also kind of keeping them in check and not letting them raise their rates too much to the point where they're pricing out a lot of our senior citizens because healthcare is
yeah,
getting way too expensive. But I think to me, healthcare should be a right. We should all have the right and the access to healthcare.
yeah,
It's hard when you have so many different people on the, social economic status, range where it's, what's affordable to one person is not affordable to another person. So, for trying to find that balance where everyone can afford and at least have basic healthcare I think is a key thing because it shouldn't just be a privilege. It should be a right. We should all have it. Going about it in a smart, responsible, financially conservative and financial way is important. Not just,
yeah,
being loosey goosey with our financial resources, but making it, affordable, while making sure that people get the healthcare that they need and not just, well, you got to pay this one set price and you get what you get. If I don't
yeah,
need certain things, then I shouldn't have to pay for it. I think that's important
yeah,
too. So finding that balance where we're being financially smart and responsible while also making sure that people have the health care that they want and need.
yeah. That's right. What are your stances on energy and the environment?
I'm big on the environment. I'm big on trying to preserve our environment as much as possible. I
Yeah,
love I love being outside in nature and just getting fresh air, and to me that's where I feel closest to God is when I'm outside just in nature.
yeah,
And so that's something I want to preserve as much as possible. Um, at the end of the day, I own a home, and over the past 5 years, I've seen my energy bill go up and up and up and up.
yeah,
And again, it's getting to the point where that it's getting too expensive. So trying to put a cap on that, trying to, working with FPL, to limit that to find other energy resources. Not, I don't want to say 100% just, solar panels and things like that, because that's not sustainable either. When you have a hurricane, you have a storm, those, solar panels get
yeah,
damaged. Well, now
yeah,
what? So to me, it's about diversifying resources and options so that, you have FPL, you have solar panels, you have things like that. But then what are some other options? What are some other ways we can generate some energy so it's not just all contingent on one resource?
Yeah.
Like even FPL, when you have a hurricane, FPL is the only energy company in the state, and so we're totally reliant on them. So if a
Yeah.
hurricane comes through and knocks out our power lines, whatever, that's we have to wait for them to get things repaired and get things fixed. And so we need to have
Yeah.
other options, other backup resources. For me, I'm very big on being proactive rather than reactive. So what are some proactive ways that we can, plan ahead to make sure that we have the energy that we need in a cost efficient way where it's not, costing, Florida residents more and more each year, but also at the same time being responsible and being proactive and making sure that we have what we need, before we have
Yeah.
major events, so that we're not scrambling at the end and, we're all sitting around, waiting for FPL to make the repairs that they need. And to be fair, they do a great job. I know they're out there busting their butts. The FPL workers are
Yeah,
working day
sure.
and night after a hurricane to get power back up. It's not like I'm not trying to play like they're not doing a good job. It's just my issue is like they're the only resource. They're the only energy source
Yeah.
we have. And that when it's all dependent on one resource and then that something happens to that, well then, now we're all kind of, stuck in the mud until something gets
Yeah.
resolved. So having, proper resources, proper energy resources, but diversifying those resources so it's not just
Yeah.
all on one company, on one energy resource.
All right. Well, the last question would be about your stances on civil liberties and constitutional rights.
So at the end of the day, constitutional rights are constitutional rights.
Yeah.
So that's important to me. Free speech, right to own a gun, all those things are important. You know, for me, at the end of the day, I'm big on, the laws of the land, but what's more important to me are God's laws. And so
Yeah.
if one infringes on the other, that to me is an issue. So as long as anything in the Constitution is our civil liberties don't infringe on God's laws and God's plans, then I'm all for it and protecting those civil liberties as much as possible and protecting the Constitution because
Yeah.
as Americans, those are the rights that we have, and we have a constitution for a reason. It's to give us, the freedom and liberties that we deserve, but also to keep things, in check too. You can't just,
Yeah.
can't just be wild
Yeah.
west out there. So the Constitution and the laws in those in that Constitution are important, and we need to respect that and adhere to that, and make sure that everybody's getting free speech, right to bear arms, the right to vote, all those things.
Yeah.
So long as we're not enforcing them in such a way that it's infringing upon God's laws. And that's what's crucial to me. As long as those two are good and uh, there's no infringement on one or the other, then that's good for me.
All right, great. So thank you. Thank you very much for answering all my questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, have a nice day.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.